Hey folks, it's Ken. Welcome back to another episode of the Gila Monster Rides. Today we have a little bit something different. We're going to be doing our Q&A episode from the last two videos. I took some of the comments, the questions that were in the comments, and I actually got some from just from some viewers that directly messaged me through other means. And so we're going to go through. This is actually going to be a pretty quick video. There's only a few questions really, but I thought it would be better to handle them on video because like at least one of them really needs some explanation where well, we'll get to that. So anyway, the first question, at what mileage did you fit the big bore kit? Well, I'm kind of having to fudge my memory here. In that I think it was just shy of 3,000 miles on the bike when I did the big bore kit. I'm roughly a little over 4,500 miles now, and I've got somewhere around 1,750 miles on the big bore kit. So I think it was right around the 3,000 mile mark. The important thing about that was that I had already broken the bike in and knew how it felt when I was going into the big bore kit. That was important. And I also had done a dyno run. I don't think I've talked about that a whole lot, but I went and got a dyno run done when it was bone stock. That way I had that data specifically to go off of as we added mods. And well, I kind of had wanted to do a dyno run sort of midway point before I did the big bore kit, but time and everything else just I needed to move along and get it done. So we're gonna get a dyno run done here very soon. I'm looking to update the map one more time. I'm talking about my custom map, and we'll get into that a little more in the mapping video, the tuning video that I have coming up, that I think you guys will really like and find really interesting, because there's a lot of concepts in that I don't really hear a lot of other motorcycle YouTube channels talking about. Let's see. Oh yeah, so I did forget to mention in the big bore install video and even in my review video that I had fitted a 16 tooth sprocket. So that was one of the comments. I actually got that, I think, from more than one person. And that was, did you fit the 16 tooth front sprocket? I did, because it lowers the RPM when I'm at kind of the higher end of my speed range. It lowers it just a little bit, so it makes high rate cruising just a little bit easier. It's not like it's not a very harsh change. Like it's only, so one tooth in the front is roughly equal to 3 in the back, and up or down. And I think it was definitely worth it for me because I was looking for a bike that I could press into use on the interstate if I needed it to. Although I mainly plan on taking it on backcountry highways, 2-lane highways for the most part. Yeah, and an important thing to mention about that is like I could foresee the question that somebody might ask, do you recommend a 16 tooth sprocket? And the answer is it depends. Really, I think if I hadn't really upped the torque and the power of the bike, I don't think it would be worth it. Matter of fact, I think if I were to do a bike again where I wasn't going to do the Hunter ECU so that I could go over 72, I don't think I'd change to the 16th tooth sprocket. I don't think that really needs it. And you do lose just a tiny bit of low down torque, lowering the rev range by doing that. And these smaller capacity engines, they're a little more sensitive to that than your bigger bikes. For instance, on my Honda Grom, I kind of souped it up too a little bit. I haven't done a big bore kit on it, but I did do a stage 2 cam, free flow exhaust, free flow air filter, remapped it. I actually bought a map from somebody, had them reprogram my ECU, and where was I going to go with that? Oh, so I went down a tooth in my front sprocket because that engine is 125 cc's. That engine's so small that it honestly benefited by going down a tooth in the front, because it gave me more torque for the bike to use fifth gear a little better. Um, it didn't really change my top end a whole lot. I am revving higher, but I'm able to deliver that torque more into to the bike, if that makes sense. Hopefully, one of the other questions I got from multiple people was, would the big bore kit help with the hills? And hands down, I think it definitely would. Although, like, going back to the last question about the 16 tooth sprocket, I think that going to the big, if you're like especially if you're a really big guy and you're having trouble on the hills with the Classic 350, the big bore would help, but I would probably stick to the 15 tooth front sprocket if higher speeds really aren't, your goal, and it's not everybody's goal. So I would probably stick to the 15 tooth sprocket, skip the Hunter ECU, and just do the 410 kit. Okay, so the top speed, got that from a couple different people, and so far I have not gone really past the previous top speeds I've gotten on the bike, and that was pre big bore, but after all of these other installs, like the performance stuff. It's right about 85, 86 miles an hour. I have a very, very, very educated guess that the top speed of the bike, under pretty much perfect conditions, and I mean a real world, like as long as it's out on a road, but I'm not like battling a wind and I'm not battling a hill, with enough time, I think I can do 91 miles an hour. And I apologize, I forget what that is in kilometers an hour. But speaking of kilometers an hour, I have no problem getting it up to approximately 137 kilometers an hour and holding it. That doesn't seem to be much of an issue. The last month, the weather has been super windy for like all of April. All of May was super windy, and I haven't really got out of the greater Tucson area with the bike recently. So, or it's even since the big bore, honestly. I've just mainly been commuting on it and doing some shorter rides, so I haven't gotten it out anywhere I can stretch its legs, so to speak, and I've been battling the wind, so I haven't really got a good feel for how well it's going to reach that theoretical 91 miles an hour. And one thing I want to mention about that, and one reason I came to that number, was I was originally really hoping I could possibly scratch the tongue on this bike, but that was based on the fact that I was assuming that with the Powertronics I was going to be able to raise the RPM limiter up to 7,500 RPM, whereas the all of the J series engines are rev limited by the factory to 6,850. I don't know how they came up with that number, but I was hoping I could raise it up to 7,500. Not that I would be running it that way very often, but just to like see if it could, get up to that kind of speed. Theoretically, with the tire diameters, the chain length, the gear ratios, everything, theoretically, I had about a good 30% chance that I would hit the ton with the bike. Being that I've now found out that the rev extend feature on the Powertronics will not work with the Classic 350. The the rev limiter on the Classic 350 is hardwired, and it's kind of like the speed limiter. You can't get around it, and so I'm just stuck with the 6850 RPM limit. Because of that, and based on what I've been feeling with the bike, how much room I think I have past, where I've been doing that like 85 miles an hour, 137 kilometers an hour, I think that 91 is probably my realistic top speed. Now I will mention that I'm also really hesitant to try that. I probably will someday, somewhere, but the handling, and this is part of the thing where it goes back to, like, it's been really windy, but the roads are garbage in southern Arizona. There are life-ending potholes and grooves on the interstate here for a motorcycle, and I'm just being a little bit more careful. I haven't really pushed it past 85, and most of the time I'm only really doing that to pass trucks quickly and safely, and then I'm getting back down to closer to the speed limit. But the handling around that 137 kilometers an hour starts getting a little sketchy, so I don't really think that I would want to be above that much any of the time, really. I am a really light guy on Classic 350s. Aren't the lightest bikes, especially for their size, but they are, they say they're like half the weight of some of your big touring bikes, so it gets blown around a little bit, and in any case, it starts feeling sketchy up there. So the last question, and one that's going to need a little bit more explanation, because I just didn't want to throw the number out to you guys or say, oh, it hasn't changed. We need to talk about the fuel economy of the bike. People want to know, what's my miles per gallon? How's the fuel economy of the bike changed? And the short answer is not much. I mean, it really honestly hasn't changed hardly at all. Now, I only really started hard tracking the miles per gallon pretty recently, so take that into account. But what I do have in long term, like in the head memory, brain memory, is that I would always track how far I basically run my bike with the Trip 1 meter on, and I just watch to see how far I can get on a tank of fuel before I start getting the flashing fuel light. And I'm, most of the time I'm getting like anywhere from 150 to 175 miles, depending on how I'm driving. That really hasn't changed. I have been tracking it a little more tightly lately, and I notice I am getting a little bit less on days that I'm doing way more interstate travel. So like those days when I'm doing 75, 80, back and forth to work, multiple days in a row, as opposed to taking like one of the little bit of slower routes where my bike can sit in eco mode. That really does make a big difference. But I don't think it's really that much different than when the bike was stock. I get as low as high 60 miles per gallon, and I'm talking about US gallons. And then I can also, if I'm really nice to Francine, she'll chop out 80 miles to the gallon. So I don't think that that's really changed a ton. Let's see. Oh, so now we need to get to why, and it comes down to efficiency. And I want to introduce, excuse me, I want to introduce a term that will become important when we start talking about the tuning video. And it's one that I don't really hear on any other motorcycle YouTube channel, and that's volumetric efficiency. So we've done several things that have been a little bit of a tug and war with the bike, in that we've increased power and torque. We've also lowered the revs with the but the 16 tooth front sprocket. And on top of that, the way I've worked the mapping, we have really increased what we call volumetric efficiency. Now, volumetric efficiency is basically just a concept like picture your lungs. So if you have a tidal volume of your lungs of say 1.4 liters, and you can take in 1.4 liters, you breathe it all in, that's 100% volumetric efficiency. Now, as we get older, if you're a smoker, things like that, you might not be able to get only in, 13 or 1,200 milliliters of volume into your lungs. And then you have a decreased volumetric efficiency. You're not able to meet the volume that could be there. And so the same thing is happening in our cylinder. When the piston is all the way down, you have a certain amount of volume in there. Now, the bike can't always pull that in because of valve timing, things like that. So between the cam and the tune and the RPM of the bike, those all kind of work in concert to basically allow for a certain amount of air to be pulled into the bike. What we've done with the tune is that we've really increased the efficiency of that to where over stock, from where it was running really lean and had a lower volumetric efficiency, we've optimized that by my tune working with the cam where those valve openings are overlapping and staying open longer. So essentially, Francine is breathing much, much easier. It's like we've given her some albuterol. And so in with that, we're actually burning the fuel much more efficiently, and we're not leaving any unburnt fuel. We're not leaving any power left on the table. We've just increased the efficiency of the bike, so she's working smarter, not harder. So we actually are using more fuel, but it's you can think of it in an equation where it's producing that much more power, and we've reduced the RPM. So the bike is just moving with less effort. So fuel mileage doesn't change. One comment I've gotten on a couple of videos, and I've answered it in the questions, but in case anybody's curious, lots of people want to know about my handlebars. They are low handlebars, and they're almost like cafe racer-esque. They're actually called Norman Hyde M-bars, and that's because if you stood it up, it looks like an M. So essentially, those can be mounted two different ways, upside down or right side up, and it'll give you a little bit different riding position. Essentially, what it does is it gives me like a drag bar sort of riding position, but they look just much more stylish and era correct for what I think the Classic 350 is going for as far as the look goes. And once it looks like that mid-50s, there are a couple things I wanted to tell you about the Norman Hyde M-bars, though. They are a little bit shorter and they're stiffer. So one thing I've noticed with Francine is that because they're stiffer, they generate a little bit more vibration than the stock bars, but it's not really been that big a deal for me. I do at higher speeds, I definitely, on my bar end mirrors, they are blurred, but I can see what I'm looking for, and I'm mainly just looking to see if there's a car in the left lane. I need to hop over to the left lane, same to the right. I'm making sure the bike is clear. I can see well enough for that kind of thing, but it's not like they're crystal clear because they are vibing a little bit at higher speeds. Once I get down to more reasonable normal street speeds, they clear up quite a bit. So it's just the vibration. The other thing, because they are mounted so low, I could have probably done a better job mounting them, where they're positioned if I was really trying to avoid this, but I can not actually get full lockout on the bike. My left side handlebar control will contact the tank. So that might be a deal breaker for you. I've just kind of lived with it. I don't ever turn the bike that hard. And it's where I live, it's very rural. Like, you can't see my bikes from the street. I don't normally keep it in a locked out position anyway. So it hasn't been that big a deal for me. If I get my bike stolen, I guess I'll worry about it next time. Okay, so the other elephant in the room is some of the people that watched both episodes, they are savvy enough to know that Himalayan Tools also produces a 500 kit, and they wanted to know why I went for the 410 rather than the 500. Well, I want to clear up one thing about the 500 kit. It's actually, if you do the math, it's 477 cc's. So it's really only 60 cc's bigger, but that's about as much, or like 67, but that's about as much as mine is bigger than overstock. So you're kind of doubling down on what the 410 kit offers. The main thing there was that the 500 kit, or the 477 kit, it is a higher compression ratio than the 410 kit. And you have to look back. I was working off of what information was available to me at the time. The manufacturer, Himalayan Tools, was recommending a octane of gas for that is not available in the United States. I was like, unless you just use octane boosters or you go get race fuel and mix it yourself. They were saying essentially it needed 95 octane in the US, because I think they were wanting, I think it's called 100 RON, RON. And I thought, well, that's a no-go, because I want this bike to be able to travel. I don't want to be constantly pouring octane boosters into my bike to get it up to that kind of level. So, good Lord, I've been talking forever. Now, I have seen that Baxter Cycle, I know that they've put on, I've talked to them about this, they've put a 500 kit on a Hunter 350. So they have made a Hunter 500, and they are saying that it actually runs off of 91 octane with no knock. I trust those guys. They've tested that bike. They've had it out on the roads, and they've had no knock with that bike. The main thing with that was the other thing they found, they didn't lower the compression. They used regular 91 pump gas, but the compression ratio was high enough that you basically had to get the bike into fourth or fifth gear and roll it until you could feel it just kind of ease up, meaning that you got past top dead center before you could start it, because the starter was not strong enough, the stock starters, to actually start the bike when it had a higher compression. So you had to push the bike until it had a little bit lower compression in the engine, and then you could start the bike. Again, Francine's a daily rider. I ride her to work all the time. Wasn't necessarily something I wanted to deal with, so 410 kit was it. The other thing that I thought long term was that the piston that is in that 500 kit is proprietary to Himalayan Tools. Now, it might be one that they sourced from somebody. I'm not sure of the dimensions, but the neat thing about the 410 kit is that it uses a stock Himalayan piston. The pistons are available. I can get another piston if I want. Really super easy. I can get the rings really easy if I just need to rebuild my top end. So I was kind of thinking long term in rebuildability of my engine, and that there were going to be more stock parts available. Say, if I don't know, if Himalayan Tools went out of business, I wouldn't be SOL. So there you have it. I have done about almost 300 miles since I put out the review video, and everything's still running great. The only thing that I'm going to be doing, and I'll talk more extensively in the tuning video coming up, is that I rewrote the map to that's now optimized for getting up to a rev limiter of 6850. Not about getting there, it's just that that is my limit. So I've kind of like retuned what happens before that and what happens kind of like when we get there. And like I said, I'll explain that more in the tuning video. But essentially, the map that I talked about in the tuning video is optimized for a rev limiter of like 7,500. So it's still working great, working fabulous, but I am retweaking it, being that we have that rev limiter of 6850. And I honestly, was leaving a little bit on the table power and torque wise, I think, by having it mapped to be able to go to 7,500. So I might end up picking up a little bit more pep to go. We'll have to see. The last thing I want to get to, and I know I gave some thanks last time, but I really appreciate everybody that's been joining me recently. We went from, I think it was like 402 or 403 subscribers. When I left work tonight, I think we were at 473 or 470, or excuse me, 573 or 74. And I'm just kind of really crazy happy about the support and all the comments. Like, this is part of the reason why I started this channel, was I just wanted to share this sort of information with you guys, and also share my passion for taking interesting bikes and making them more interesting, and I'm like a real major history buff, and I'm really into a lot of the vintage bikes. All of my bikes currently are modern bikes, but 3 of the 4 are styled back to vintage bikes, essentially. So in a nutshell, that's essentially what this channel is about: vintage style bikes, stories about them, what we do to them, how we build them up. And if that sounds like it's good to you, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you want to get notified when the next video coming out. We have the tuning video coming up. We also have a historical episode coming up, and I have another special episode coming up that I think you'll enjoy, because it's all about how I think about bikes. So it's a little bit of a philosophical episode. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope the rest of your week goes good. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.